Our stories and crafts this week will take us to Russia. We had started out in New York, then we went to Mexico, Brazil, Ghana, and Africa. Then we went to Europe, to Denmark, and now we're going to travel to Russia. For our crafts this week, we will make a Russian cityscape with its typical onion domes, a Fabergé egg, and our own paper nesting dolls. Before making our crafts, we will listen to 2 Russian folk tales. The Magic Nesting Doll by Jacqueline K. Ogburn, illustrated by Laurel Long. Once upon a time, a girl named Katya lived with her grandmother at the edge of the forest. They worked hard and loved each other tenderly until one day the old woman fell ill. She called Katya to her side and said, "Little pigeon, my time is near. Soon you must make your own way in the world, but I have a gift for you that will help you." She took a little matryoshka, a nesting doll, out of a small box. The doll was smooth and bright, painted in the likeness of the grandmother with apron and kerchief. Katya started to open the doll. "Stop," said the old woman. "Not yet. If your need is great, open the doll and help will come. But you may only do so 3 times. After that, the magic will be gone. Keep the doll and remember me." "I will remember, grandmother," said Katya. After the old woman had died and the priest buried her, Katya left with the doll in her pocket. It was spring when Katya set out, but the next day there was frost, then snow. It snowed for weeks as if winter had returned, and Katya was cold and hungry. Often she considered asking the doll for help, but then she would find shelter or a bit of food on her own. Finally she came to a great city. An innkeeper let her stay in the kitchen and fed her bread and soup. "Thank you for your kindness," Katya said. "Please, could you wake me in the morning?" "Then you will sleep forever, my friend. There is no morning here now," the innkeeper told her. "Ever since the Tsarevich fell under a wicked spell that turned him into living ice, it is always winter, without thaw, night without moon, and dark without dawn." "A man of ice? What a sight that must be," said Katya. "Not a sight for the likes of us," said the innkeeper. "He lies asleep in the palace, watched over by his uncle, the Grand Vizier." "I have no coin to pay you, but perhaps I can break the spell," Katya said, touching the doll in her pocket. The innkeeper laughed, but Katya was determined to see the man of living ice and to lift the enchantment. When Katya awoke, it was still dark, but she made her way to the palace, a glorious blaze of red stone and golden domes. The guards turned her away at the door, but she spied a huge tree in the courtyard. Nimble as a squirrel, Katya climbed its branches and peered through a window. Upon a velvet bed of scarlet and gold lay the Tsarevich, still and glittering in the candlelight. Behind him stood a tall old man who glared at Katya as he snapped his fingers for his guards. Katya slid down the tree trunk into a circle of grim-faced soldiers. They took her into the chamber of the frozen prince. Katya had never seen a man so beautiful. His full lips were pale blue, and his glassy hands long and fine. His hair glistened like frost. The only sign that he was not a statue carved out of ice was the faint cloud of his breath and the slight stirring of his chest. The old man was as red as the prince was blue. His hair and beard glowed like flame, and his skin was ruddy. "Why are you spying on the Tsarevich?" he demanded. "Pardon, sir," said Katya. "I only wish to see a man of living ice." Now that she had, she pitied him, and trapped in his cold enchantment. She longed to see him awake. "I have come to break the spell." "You?" scoffed the Grand Vizier. "The wizards of 9 kingdoms could not break the spell. Great magic is needed to unweave it, more magic than a peasant girl can imagine." The Grand Vizier had reason to know. He had cast the spell himself to prevent the Tsarevich from being crowned and to keep the kingdom for his own. He took all of his power to maintain the enchantment. "But I can't break the spell, I swear it," cried Katya. "Throw her in a dungeon," ordered the Grand Vizier. The guards took her to a stone prison in a far corner of the palace grounds and down a dark stairway. The door clanged, shutting Katya inside a tiny cell. She took the nesting doll out of her pocket. "Oh, Matryoshka, surely I need help now. Carefully, she twisted off the top half of the smiling doll. Inside was another figure, not a woman, but a bear. He yawned and stretched, growing until he nearly filled the cell. The bear said, "So, little one, tell me your need." "A magic spell has turned the Tsarevich into living ice, and now the kingdom has winter without thaw, night without moon, and dark without dawn," Katya said. "I swore to break the spell. Also, I'm not fond of dungeons, and I would like to get out." "Dungeons," said the bear. "Seems a fine cave to me. Still, if you wish to leave, then so we shall. As for the spell, who better than a bear to bring the spring thaw? Climb on my back." Katya put the doll together, slipped it into her pocket, and climbed onto the bear's back. With one huge paw, the bear smashed down the door. They rushed up the twisting stairs and out behind the palace gardens. The bear gave a great roar, and a warm wind began to blow. The ice covering the trees began to melt, and water dripped from the branches. "Please take me to the Tsarevich," said Katya. She wanted to see him awake. As the bear walked, patches of brown earth filled in his footprints. The palace guards could not stop the bear, and Katya rode straight to the velvet bed. But the spell was not broken. The prince still slept, though now he looked more ivory than icy blue. "Something more than my roar is needed," said the bear. Katya was disappointed, for now she felt more than pity for the enchanted prince, but said, "Thank you, kind bear." "Keep the doll and remember me," said the bear, and vanished. The Grand Vizier burst into the room with a dozen soldiers, pale with fear and rage. The thaw had weakened his spell. Streaks of gray were in his hair and beard. "Seize her!" he shouted. This time the soldiers took Katya into the forest and tossed her down a deep ravine. Though it was warmer now, the sky was still dark and clouded with clouds. She tried to climb out, but the ravine was too steep and she fell back to the bottom. Katya brushed herself off and took the doll from her pocket. "Matryoshka, I need your help again," she said, opening the doll. Inside, the bear doll stood still and quiet. She removed it and took off the top half. A wolf twitched an ear, shook his head, and grew until his great gray tail tickled Katya's knee. He turned in a circle and then said politely before her, "Small one, tell me your need," he said. Katya told him of the man of ice and the night without moon and dark without dawn and her vow. "Also, I do not wish to sleep in this ravine." The wolf grinned and saying, "It seems a fine place to rest to me, but leave we shall. As for the other, who better than a wolf to bring back the moon? Come with me." Katya tucked the doll away and climbed onto the wolf's back. The wolf leapt out of the pit and looped through the forest. At the edge of a field, he gave a howl that seemed to come from the throats of 1,000 wolves. The clouds overhead began to thin, and the face of the moon peered through. "Please," said Katya, "take me to the Tsarevich." As the wolf ran towards the palace, moonlight flowed behind them like a stream. The guards offered no resistance, and they went straight to the Tsarevich's chamber. He still slept, but now there was a touch of color in his face and hair. The wolf said, "He needs more than my song to call him back." Katya sighed, for now she knew she loved the prince, and longed to see him awake for herself, not just because of her vow. She said, "Thank you, kind wolf." "Keep the doll and remember me," he replied, and vanished. In a corner of the room stood the Grand Vizier. His hair was like frost, his nose like the drip of an icicle. He seemed weak and withered, but his eyes were still fierce as he called for the soldiers to once more take Katya away. This time the soldiers took her to the top of a mountain. They lowered her by a rope onto a ledge and left her there. Katya watched the soldiers ride to the palace through the moonlight. "I need your help once more, my Matryoshka," she said to the doll. Inside the woman was the bear, inside the bear was the wolf. She wondered for a moment what would be next, then twisted the wolf doll apart. Golden light poured out. Nestled in the bottom half was a tiny bird the color of a flame. She lifted her head and stretched her wings. In a fiery swirl, she flew up to the top of the mountain and down to Katya's side. "Tell me your need, my chick," said the firebird. "Oh, firebird, the Tsarevich has been turned into ice by a wicked spell. The bear brought back the thaw, the wolf brought back the moon, but still it is dark without dawn across the kingdom," said Katya. "I swore to break his spell, and I do not wish to live on a ledge." "It seems a fine perch to me, but as you wish. And as for the rest, who better than a firebird to bring back the sun?" she said. Katja put the doll together and climbed onto the Firebird's back. Up they swooped into the sky, and the Firebird burst forth with a great thrill of song. As the last note died away, pink fingers of light stretched over the top of the mountain. "Please take me to the Tsarevich," said Katja. The Firebird flew to the palace, sunlight flooding the sky behind them. They flashed over the heads of the guards into the Tsarevich's room. The Grand Vizier stood next to the bed, still as stone. The prince was restored. His hair was brown as earth, and his skin warm with life. He stirred as the Firebird's light fell across his face, but he did not wake. "Why isn't he awake? Can't you help him?" Katja cried. "His heart is still frozen. Another kind of magic is needed now," the Firebird replied. A strange crackling and snapping sound came from the corner. The Grand Vizier was trying to speak, but his jaw would not move. Now he was made of living ice, but his eyes were open, glaring at Katja. Turning away from the Grand Vizier, Katja said, "Thank you, kind bird. I will find some way to wake the Tsarevich." "You have all you need, little pigeon. Keep the doll and remember me," said the Firebird, and she vanished. "I have no more magic to help you," Katja said to the prince. She watched him, and as she thought, at last she knew what she must do. "Perhaps the wizards of the 9 kingdoms can break the spell now. I will go and find them." She looked down at the prince, more handsome now than ever. Her heart was heavy at the thought of leaving him. Quickly she bent and kissed him. Crash! The Grand Vizier toppled over and smashed into 1,000 pieces. "You're real," said the prince. "I dreamt that a marvelous girl kept coming to me, riding wonderful beasts, and it was you." Katja's heart leaped with gladness, for she had found the last bit of magic. As for the prince, what better bride than a girl who could break spells and ride magical beasts? They were married, and most happily, of course. As for Katja, what better groom than a man whose heart melts at love's first kiss? The Tsar banned all hunting of bears, wolves, and firebirds, and Katja kept the nesting doll in a place of honor on a cushion from the velvet bed. Russia has a vast expanse of forests, and now we will listen to a story about animals who live in the woods. Deep in the Woods, a folktale by Christopher Core. Deep in the woods was a little wooden house. It was painted bright white, with 9 neat windows and a red front door. It was the perfect little home, but it stood empty, cold, and sad. One day a mouse was passing by the wooden house. "This looks like the perfect place for a little mouse like me," he said to himself, and scurried inside. He swept the floors and washed the windows and mopped and wiped and scoured until everything was squeaky clean. A frog hopped by and saw the wooden house, with its 9 neat windows and red front door. "This looks like the perfect home," he said, and went to see if anyone was in. "Have you got room for a handsome frog like me?" he asked, and the mouse welcomed him inside to live in the wooden house together. A rabbit bounded by the little wooden house, with its 9 neat windows and red front door. She thought it looked like the perfect home, so she knocked on the door. "Have you got room for a pretty rabbit like me?" she asked, and the mouse and the frog welcomed her inside to live in the wooden house together. A beaver bustled past the little wooden house with its 9 neat windows and its red front door. So did a fox, and a rooster, and a deer, and a red squirrel. "Have you got room for a merry band like us?" they asked, and the mouse and the frog and the rabbit welcomed them inside to live in the wooden house together. An owl sitting in a tree could see all the animals living together in the little wooden house with its 9 neat windows and its red front door. He flew down and knocked on the door with his beak. And so did 2 magpies and a woodpecker. "Have you got room for some feathered friends like us?" they asked, and squeezed inside to live with the mouse and the frog, and the rabbit and the beaver and the fox and the rooster and the deer and the squirrel. The animals felt very glad to live together in a little wooden house with its 9 neat windows and its red front door. "It's the perfect home," they said. The animals were so happy all together. They filled the little wooden house with their singing and their dancing, and they played into the night. The animals' music floated through the woods and tickled the ears of a big brown bear. He followed the sound until he found a little wooden house. Through each of the 9 neat windows he could see a different creature, each one as happy as could be. The bear knocked on the red front door. "Have you got room for a great big bear like me?" he asked. The music stopped. The dancing ended. The mouse and the frog and the rabbit and the beaver and the fox and the rooster and the deer and the squirrel and the owl and the 2 magpies and the woodpecker all came out of the house to meet the bear. They looked at each other and shook their heads sadly. "No," they answered unhappily, "there isn't room for a big bear in this little wooden house." Said the bear, "are you sure?" He tried to get through the 9 neat windows. He tried to get in through the red front door, and at last of all he climbed on top of the roof. The little wooden house began to tremble. "Creak," heard the animals, and they looked nervously up at the great big bear on top of the little wooden house. Crump went the house. Whoop went the bear. "No," cried the animals. "Oh," said the bear. He dusted himself down. The little wooden house had collapsed underneath him. "Oh no," sobbed the animals. "What will we do without our home in the forest?" Bear felt very sad. He wished he could think of a way to help. Then Bear had an idea. He chopped down trees and trimmed the branches and hammered and lifted and banged. The other animals joined in too. They worked and worked until they had built a house that was big enough for everyone. It was the perfect home for a mouse and a frog, and a rabbit and a beaver, and a fox and a rooster, and a deer and a squirrel, and an owl, and 2 magpies and a woodpecker, and a bear. It even had 9 neat windows and a red front door. The only thing left to do now was celebrate. Our first craft will be making paper nesting dolls or matryoshkas, inspired by the story The Magic Nesting Doll. Maybe our nesting dolls will be magic too. In your kit you will find the templates for the big nesting doll, the front and the back, and 4 small nesting dolls that will go inside the bigger one. First we will start coloring in the smaller nesting dolls. I will color each of the dolls' clothes and hair differently, so some of them could have blonde hair, red hair, black hair, whatever you like, or you could also color them all the same. Whatever you choose is fine. Don't forget to color in the bigger nesting doll as well. Now that all of our dolls are colored in, we will cut them out. We will also cut out the back for the big doll. We will place the 2 pieces of the big doll on top of each other and then attach the top doll to the bottom on one side only with tape, or you can also staple them together but so that one side will stay open and to create a little pouch. Now we can place the smaller cut out nesting dolls inside the big one to create our own nesting dolls. Inside your kit we'll find a styrofoam egg. We will make our own Fabergé eggs. First we will color our eggs with marker. In order not to get marker all over your hands, you can use a glove or hold your egg simply in a tissue paper. Now we're ready to decorate our egg with jewels. In your kit you will find a stick-on jewels. You simply have to remove the paper backing and then you can stick them onto the egg. Now you have your own bejeweled egg, your own Fabergé egg. For our last project, we'll make a cityscape of Russian architecture, especially including the famous onion domes. In your kit, you find various colored papers. We will use the thicker light colored blue paper as our background. You'll also find a template for the onion domes in your kit. You can use those to cut out different colored domes for your cityscape. There's also aluminum foil in your kit you can use to embellish the domes or the structure. First we'll cut out rectangles in different sizes and colors to use as our structures. Here I'm using the template to cut out a purple dome. Once you have cut out all your shapes and domes, you can glue them onto your paper to create your own Russian cityscape. I hope you enjoyed this week's crafts and stories.